Caleb Turner thought a $400 cabin buried deep in the Sierra Nevada would be the place he finally disappeared from the world. But the moment he stepped inside, his German Shepherd Hunter froze, ears raised toward the stone fireplace, like it was breathing. Then the sheriff arrived, uninvited. Then someone slashed Caleb's tire. And when he lifted a loose slab beneath the hearth, he uncovered a hidden cache tied to a missing journalist and a corporation willing to kill to keep their secret buried. If this story touches you, please help me reach my first 1,000 subscribers. Your click really means more than you think. God bless you for keeping hope alive. A cold wind descended through the pines, carrying the dry scent of winter across the Sierra Nevada foothills. Caleb Turner stepped out of his aging gray pickup truck and paused, letting the cold air bite into his lungs, not out of discomfort, but because silence like this was something he had not tasted in years. At 45, he looked older than the number suggested, though not from weakness. His frame, standing at 182 meters, was lean and hardened, sculpted by years of field rations, sleepless nights, and a life that had shrunk into quiet corridors nobody else dared to enter. His dark brown hair, longer than military regulations, would have allowed brushed lightly against his nape and carried scattered streaks of silver at the temples. A rough scruff of beard, uneven and stubborn, shadowed his jaw, adding to the sense that Caleb was a man weathered more by memory than by years. His eyes, storm gray, thoughtful, and clouded with an unspoken grief, took in the forest with an expression that hovered between longing and wariness. His outfit looked like it had been assembled over a decade of self-exile, a heavy dark brown leather jacket softened with age, a faded flannel shirt patterned in worn red and navy stripes, jeans rubbed pale at the knees, cold weather boots scuffed from rocky trails, and a gray wool scarf wound loosely around his neck. Standing beside him was Hunter, his 8-year-old German Shepherd, a striking animal with a sable coat that looked almost silver under the weak sunlight. Hunter's ears stood tall, his amber eyes alert and intelligent. He had served with Caleb in the military long ago, and though age had softened the sharpest edges of his movements, the dog still carried himself like a soldier, disciplined, loyal, and always watching. For years, Hunter had been the only creature Caleb trusted without reserve. Caleb had not come to Sierra Nevada for adventure or reinvention. He had come because he was tired of noise, of people, of a world where everything reminded him of someone he had failed to save. Quiet places he believed could numb the edges of guilt. So when the Alpine County auction listed an abandoned cabin deep in the mountains for $400, Caleb didn't think twice. He didn't ask why it was so cheap. He didn't ask why the room full of locals turned silent when he raised his hand. He didn't care. Silence was priceless. The drive to the property grew rougher with every mile. The dirt road narrowed, pine branches scraped against the truck, and the ruts grew deep enough to jolt even Hunter from his calm posture. When they finally arrived at a clearing halfway up the forested slope, the cabin stood waiting, dark, slanted, and solitary. The old structure leaned slightly to one side, its wooden beams weathered by harsh winters, its roof sprinkled with patches of moss. Yet something about the place felt untouched, preserved not by care, but by the reluctance of others to come near. Caleb's boots crunched on the frost-bitten earth as he approached the porch. Hunter climbed the steps first, but the moment his paws touched the old wood, his ears shot forward. A low growl vibrated from deep in his chest, steady and warning, directed straight at the stone fireplace visible through the open doorway. Caleb frowned, stepping inside behind him. Dust coated everything like a thin shroud, yet nothing looked naturally abandoned. A man's heavy coat still hung on a rusted peg near the door. A ceramic mug sat on the table, stained by a ring of old coffee. A paperback novel lay open, its pages curled, as though its reader had stepped away only moments ago. Caleb moved slowly, his gaze sweeping the room with the instinct of a man who had walked into too many uncertain spaces. Something was wrong, not in the way a place deteriorates, but in the way a life is interrupted. Hunter approached the fireplace, sniffing intensely. His claws clicked sharply on the stone floor, and then the dog began to scratch. Hard. Urgent. Caleb's pulse tightened. He crouched beside Hunter, running a calloused hand over the dog's back, trying to understand. The fireplace was large, built of rough river stones that stretched nearly to the ceiling. Caleb tapped one of the flat stones at the base and felt it tremble beneath the pressure. He brushed away dust with his fingers, revealing the faint outline of a rectangular slab. It wasn't properly aligned with the rest. It was a lid, a cover, a doorway to something someone wanted hidden. Caleb's breath thinned. He felt the first true ripple of unease since stepping foot on the land. Memories of breaching operations of hidden traps and buried caches flickered through his mind. Hunter pressed closer, tail-rigid eyes fixed on the slab. He moved his thumb along the stone's edge, clearing more debris, until the full shape of the loosened slab became clear. Someone had placed it intentionally, yet not perfectly. Someone who had been in a hurry. Just as Caleb hooked his fingers under the stone's edge, a deep, mechanical sound rolled through the trees behind the cabin. Not wind, not nature. A vehicle engine. His heart snapped back into battle rhythm. The narrow mountain path to this cabin wasn't on any public map. No one should have known he was here. No one should have reached this deep into the forest. Hunter spun toward the doorway, hackles rising like bristled quills. The engine grew louder. Closer. Someone was coming. Someone who should not be here. And the stone slab beneath Caleb's hand suddenly felt like the hinge between a quiet life and a truth he was not meant to uncover. A thin veil of winter sunlight filtered weakly through the pine canopy. As Caleb Turner stepped out onto the porch, Hunter pressed close at his side. The forest around the cabin felt unnervingly quiet, the kind of quiet that wasn't simply peaceful, but expectant, like the woods themselves were holding their breath. Caleb had felt that kind of silence before, back in places where silence meant an unseen threat was close. His pulse tightened against old instincts he couldn't forget, even though he had spent years trying. The rumbling engine grew louder until a county-issued SUV pushed its way along the narrow dirt track tires crunching over frost. Caleb stiffened. Nobody should have known he was here, not this quickly, not without going out of their way to find him. Hunter's low growl rumbled again, ears pinned forward, tail rigid. The door of the SUV swung open, and a tall, broad-shouldered man stepped out. Sheriff Alan Royce. Caleb knew the type immediately, the kind of lawman who filled the space he walked into wearing the badge less like a duty and more like a claim. Royce looked to be in his late 50s, stocky but solid, with a thick build under his heavy olive-green winter coat. His face was square and deeply lined, as if carved by equal parts harsh weather and harsher temper. He had a neatly trimmed steel-gray mustache and thinning hair beneath his hat. But it was his eyes, small, dark, and too quick, that made Caleb's jaw tighten. They flicked from Caleb to Hunter to the cabin with the restless twitch of someone measuring every detail for risk. Afternoon, Royce called out in a voice that carried a forced friendliness, the kind of tone people used when they needed you to believe they meant no harm. "You must be the fellow who bought this property at auction." Caleb didn't offer a smile. "That's right." Royce walked closer, his boots leaving heavy prints in the frost, and extended a gloved hand. His grip was firm, practiced, but cold. "Sheriff Alan Royce. Just doing my rounds. Word travels fast out here, you know how these mountain towns are. Thought I'd check that you made it up here without trouble." Hunter inched forward, positioning himself subtly between Caleb and the sheriff, his amber eyes fixed on the newcomer. Royce gave the dog a stiff glance, lips tightening just slightly. "Fine-looking German Shepherd you've got there." Caleb rested a hand on Hunter's neck, feeling the tension coiled in the dog's muscles. "He's protective. I bet." Royce's gaze drifted past Caleb into the cabin's dim interior. His eyes paused on the fireplace. It was subtle, just a flicker of attention, before he looked away. But Caleb noticed. Everything in Caleb noticed. Royce cleared his throat. "Place has been empty a long time." "Shame, really. Man who lived here before?" "Well, he left things in a bit of a mess. Folks around here say he just walked off into the woods one night, never came back." He paused to let the words linger, studying Caleb's expression. "Mountain can swallow a man whole if he's not careful." Caleb met the sheriff's stare with unreadable eyes. "I'll be careful." Royce let out a short breath, half chuckle, half warning. "Good. Weather turns nasty fast up here." His gaze flicked to the fireplace again, something uneasy, almost fearful glinting behind his eyes. Then he stepped back toward his SUV boots, crunching sharply. "Well, enjoy your new place, Mr. Turner, and if you find anything out of the ordinary, best you let me know." Caleb didn't answer. Royce climbed into the SUV, gave a two-finger salute, and started down the trail. Only when the vehicle disappeared into the trees did Caleb finally exhale. Something was very wrong. Hunter pressed against his leg, whining low. Caleb rubbed the dog's ear. "I know. I saw it too." He headed to the truck to gather the last of his supplies, but the moment he reached the rear tire on the driver's side, he froze. A clean, precise slice cut through the rubber deep enough to guarantee a slow, steady leak. Not the work of a nail. Not an accident. Someone had slipped behind the cabin while he spoke to Royce and left him a message. Caleb straightened slowly, jaw clenching. He had been in enough hostile territory to recognize a warning disguised as mischief. Whoever had been here wanted him isolated, wanted him uneasy, and they were confident enough to sabotage his property in broad daylight. Back inside the cabin, the air felt heavier, as if the walls were leaning in, listening. Hunter trotted straight to the fireplace, resuming his anxious pacing. Caleb fetched the crowbar he'd unloaded earlier. Kneeling beside the loose stone slab, he wedged the bar underneath and applied pressure. The slab gave with a tired, grinding noise and lifted just enough for Caleb to drag it aside. Beneath it lay a small square cavity carved neatly into the cabin's foundation, dusty, dry, and deliberately hidden. Inside were several objects arranged with meticulous care: a military-style metal case, scratched and dented, 2 leather-bound journals, edges worn, several opaque black glass vials bundled in twine, and a folded map so old it crackled when Caleb touched it. Caleb set the items on the table, his heartbeat steady but heavy. He opened the first journal. The handwriting was tight and deliberate. On the first page, a name was signed with careful pressure: Nathan Collins, 2012. Beneath it, a line written in rushed, uneven strokes: "If I disappear, tell someone the truth before they bury it deeper." Caleb felt a cold shiver run down his spine. Nathan Collins, the missing owner, the man the sheriff had mentioned. But this wasn't the journal of someone who wandered into the woods and got lost. This was the record of a man afraid for his life. Hunter's sudden growl snapped Caleb's head up. The dog had stiffened, staring at the window nearest the tree line. Every muscle in his body was drawn tight, ears angled forward, hackles rising inch by inch. Caleb moved silently toward the window, keeping to the shadows. The glass was fogged with cold, but through the blur, he saw it a figure standing utterly still between the snow-draped pines, not moving, not approaching, just watching. Watching the cabin. Watching him. The figure shifted slightly, and Caleb felt the unmistakable prick of danger tighten across his shoulders. He wasn't alone on this mountain, and someone wanted him to know it. A pale winter fog crept between the pines the next morning, hanging low and heavy over the clearing, as if the mountain itself wished to conceal what lived in its shadows. Caleb Turner stood in the center of the dim cabin, the loose stone slab pushed aside, the hidden contents laid before him like the remains of a long-buried confession. Hunter sat close, his body taut with unease, ears flicking toward every distant creak of the wind. Caleb tried to steady his breathing, but the weight of what he had uncovered pressed down on him with the familiar heaviness of old battlefields, quiet, suffocating, and threaded with danger he could not yet fully see. He reached for the metal military case first. Its surface was scratched and dull, with a dent in one corner, as though it had been dropped or struck. The latch resisted for a moment before clicking open. Inside were tightly sealed vials, each filled with murky or dark liquid samples. Their glass walls felt cold in his hand. Some contained cloudy water. Others held thick, almost oily residue. The labels were handwritten dates and coordinates marked carefully in black ink. Caleb set them down gently, as though handling the bones of something that had died violently. Next, he unfolded the old map. Sections of the paper had yellowed with age, and the edges were frayed from handling, but the inked markings remained clear. Red circles dotted various streams, creeks, and small lakes across the Sierra Nevada slopes, many of which connected to the Carson Valley's watershed. Caleb's brow tightened. He didn't know much chemistry, but he recognized environmental sampling when he saw it. And the sheer number of marked locations suggested a pattern, not a single spill, but a system. He opened the first leather journal. Nathan Collins's handwriting was meticulous at the beginning, neat and purposeful, like someone who took pride in order and clarity. But the further Caleb flipped, the more the script devolved lines, slanted, pressure-deepened letters crowded together in frantic strokes. Caleb read slowly each sentence, a fragment of a man being hunted by the truth he had found. January 9th, 2012. Water sample from Pinecrest Creek shows benzene levels 30 times higher than legal limits. Soil near the runoff saturated with ammonium compounds. No natural source could cause this. Benzene, lead, ammonium, industrial chemicals. Caleb exhaled through clenched teeth. He traced a finger along a map coordinate and saw it matched the vials. Nathan continued. I've sent my preliminary findings to the county office and to the State Environmental Board. No response. Second set of samples taken near Cascadian Mining Group's northern boundary. Trucks entering at night. No permits filed. Something is very wrong. Cascadian Mining Group. The name scratched across the page like a wound. Caleb had heard it before years ago in news clips. He barely listened to stories about rapid expansion, corporate secrecy, and aggressive land purchases. But in Nathan's notebook, the tone was different. Less corporate, more predatory. Caleb flipped to a later entry. February 2nd. Black pickup again. Parked on the ridge above my cabin. Same man, heavy-set, dark jacket, watching through binoculars. I don't know who he works for, but he knows I'm close. A hollow feeling spread through Caleb's chest. He could picture the scene easily, the man in the pickup. The stillness of someone waiting for permission to move, the pressure of a gaze meant not to observe, but to intimidate. Another entry, February 11th. Break-in last night. They didn't take anything. They wanted me to know they were here. Furniture moved, journals returned to the wrong order, no footprints outside professionals. Caleb's jaw tightened. He recognized the tactic. Not theft, not sabotage, psychological pressure, psychological. A way to say we can reach you whenever we want. Then the next line struck him harder than the rest. If they take the cabin, they'll take the truth with it. Caleb closed the journal slowly, anger building in quiet, concentrated waves. He thought he had come to Sierra Nevada to escape the world, but instead he had stepped onto someone else's battlefield. A battlefield Nathan Collins had fought alone, until he vanished. Hunter nudged his leg and whined softly. Caleb looked down, meeting the dog's anxious amber eyes. He stroked the fur between Hunter's ears, but the gesture did little to calm either of them. Caleb's mind raced through possibilities. Sheriff Royce had come too quickly. His eyes had lingered too long on the fireplace. And the slashed tire was no coincidence. Whoever had come last night, the shadowed figure by the trees, wanted him gone, or silenced, or scared enough to leave the cabin to rot just as they intended years ago. He moved to the window and scanned the tree line, remembering the figure he'd seen the night before. It hadn't been a hallucination. Someone had stood there, not moving, watching the cabin until Hunter alerted him. Caleb had lived through enough ambushes to know this wasn't over. This was the beginning. Night fell fast over the mountains, pulling long shadows through the pines. Caleb lit the small lantern and sat near the table, the journals spread open around him like pieces of a puzzle he needed to solve before it consumed him too. He read until the words blurred and the lantern flickered low. Hunter slept lightly at his feet, tail twitching, ears flicking at every distant crack of the frozen forest. Then metal on metal. A soft click from the door. Caleb froze, breath stilled, every muscle in his body turning to stone. Hunter's head snapped up, and a thunderous growl erupted from the dog's chest as he lunged toward the front of the cabin. Caleb grabbed his flashlight and moved behind him, instincts overtaking thought. The doorknob shifted. Another faint scrape. Someone outside was trying to pick the lock. Hunter barked a deep, ferocious explosion of sound that filled the cabin. The scratching stopped. Fast footsteps retreated across the porch, crunching through snow before disappearing toward the woods. Caleb flung open the door lantern held high. A dark figure sprinted into the trees, melting into the black silhouette of the forest. Caleb stood in the doorway, Hunter at his side, breath clouding in the freezing air. "They'll come back," he whispered, voice low and steady. "Stronger." Hunter growled once, as if agreeing. And somewhere beyond the pines, something or someone was listening. Snow began to fall in thick, wind-tossed sheets as dawn hid behind a wall of storm clouds crawling over the Sierra Nevada. The forest that surrounded the cabin seemed to shrink beneath the weight of the oncoming winter assault, every tree bending and groaning as though bracing itself for something far worse than cold. Inside the cabin, Caleb Turner moved with quiet urgency, stuffing papers, photographs, and sample vials into a waterproof pouch. His breath came slow and steady, but his mind yearned for the sharp stillness he had once relied on in crisis. Instead, a low, simmering dread crept at the edge of every thought he was running out of time. Hunter paced in tight circles near the table, nails tapping on the old floorboards, muscles tense beneath his sable coat. The 8-year-old German Shepherd was built like a soldier, still broad shoulders, powerful legs, and a disciplined stillness broken only by moments of pure instinct. Tonight, his instinct was screaming. Every few seconds, Hunter would stop and stare at the front door, or the window ears twitching toward sounds Caleb could not yet detect. Caleb knew that pattern well. Hunter wasn't anxious, he was preparing. Caleb reached for the satellite phone he kept for emergencies and dialed the only person he trusted. Evan Brooks answered almost immediately. His voice was rough with sleep, but sharpened seconds later by concern. Evan, now an investigative journalist in Sacramento, had once been a wiry, sharp-eyed soldier who never let fear dull his judgment. He still looked the part. Short black hair, always slightly messy, angular jaw, shadowed with stubble, thin scar on his cheek, from a mission neither he nor Caleb ever spoke of. He had a quick mind, sharper tongue, and a stubborn streak that deepened after witnessing corruption in both combat zones and newsrooms. Caleb Evans' voice steadied. "What's going on?" Caleb inhaled slowly. "I found something. And someone knows I did." He explained the journals, the samples, the map, the slashed tire, the figure in the woods, the attempt on the lock. The more he spoke, the more the tension in Evans' voice hardened into controlled anger, a tone Caleb remembered well from their years in uniform. "Send me everything Evans said. Now. I'll prep a fallback plan." Caleb took photos of the journals, the vials, the map, and the inscriptions Nathan Collins left behind. He attached them in rapid succession and sent them to Evan. When the confirmation ping came through, he felt a brief, hollow flicker of relief. "You have to be careful," Caleb Evans said. "Cascadian Mining Group has powerful people behind them. If this evidence is real, it's real," Caleb said softly. The weight of what he'd uncovered made his chest tighten. "And they want it gone. All of it." Evan exhaled sharply. "Then they'll come again, I know." "Caleb, don't be a hero. If it gets bad, you run." Caleb didn't answer. His silence told Evan everything. Thunder rumbled through the mountains as the storm finally broke open. Wind slammed against the cabin with enough force to rattle the window panes. Snow blasted sideways, thick enough to erase the forest from sight. The cabin creaked like a wooden ship battling an angry sea. Caleb extinguished every light except the small lantern on the table. Dim light was safer than darkness. Darkness made a man imagine things. Light made him confirm them. He checked his rifle, clean, oiled, loaded. His movements were methodical, almost automatic. Hunter positioned himself near the door, but angled so he could move either forward or sideways instantly. Caleb stroked the dog's back. "Stay with me, boy." The blizzard raged on, transforming the cabin into a fortress surrounded by white noise. Hours passed in a slow, tense crawl. Caleb forced himself to remain alert, watching the windows, listening for anything that didn't belong to wind or snow. A sound came just before dawn. Soft. Rhythmic. Footsteps. Hunter stiffened so violently the lantern on the table flickered. His growl started deep, a low vibration that built into sharp tension. Caleb rose from his chair, lantern in one hand, rifle in the other. The footsteps multiplied. 3, maybe 4. Moving deliberately, crunching snow muffled by the storm, but close enough that their presence cut through the wind like a blade. Someone was circling the cabin. Caleb's pulse steadied into the cold, controlled rhythm he had honed long ago. He knew how to read enemies by their movement. These steps weren't hesitant or exploratory. They were precise, experienced, coordinated. Hunter moved to the left wall, then suddenly pivoted to the opposite side, then snarled at the back door. "They're testing every side," Caleb whispered. A faint metallic click came next. Then another. Tools scraping at the front lock. Hunter's bark shattered the storm's howl. Deep, violent, commanding. The lock-picking stopped for only a moment, then resumed faster, more urgent. Someone cursed outside. Caleb rushed to the window, raising his rifle and firing a warning shot into the storm. The sound exploded through the cabin. Shouts erupted outside. Feet scrambled. Someone yelled, "Fall back! Fall back!" Hunter lunged toward the door again, snarling like a creature born from the storm itself. Caleb steadied his breathing, aiming at the shadow he barely saw through the snow. Another voice shouted over the wind, filled with venom and certainty. "Next time we finish it." The silhouettes retreated, swallowed by the storm. The footsteps faded. The metal tools stopped scraping. Only the blizzard remained roaring through the mountain like a warning from the earth itself. Caleb lowered his rifle slowly, but his heart did not quiet. Hunter returned to his side, still trembling with raw instinct. Caleb knelt, resting a hand on the dog's neck. The cabin groaned under the weight of wind and fear. He whispered into the darkness, "They'll be back." Hunter's low growl rumbled like distant thunder, and Caleb understood the truth with sharp clarity. This wasn't a warning anymore. It was an execution being prepared. Snow hammered the Sierra Nevada in violent spirals as dawn struggled to rise behind the storm's thick, bruised clouds. The wind screeched through the pines like something ancient clawing at the world, and inside the burning, cold silence of the cabin, Caleb Turner worked with the precision of a man who understood exactly how close death stood. His hands, rough and steady, moved through the scattered papers and vials on the table. Every rustle of paper felt like a countdown. Every heartbeat felt like a strike of fate narrowing in. Hunter stayed close pressed against Caleb's leg, his powerful German shepherd frame trembling, not with fear but with anticipation. His ears flicked at every gust of wind, every crack in the walls, every sound beyond the storm. He sensed the danger outside, with the kind of clarity only an animal shaped by instinct, loyalty, and the shared years of military partnership could possess. Caleb lifted the metal box and leather journals, Nathan Collins' final message to the world, and carried them to the hearth. He pried open the concealed floor stone, the one Hunter had found days earlier, and lowered the evidence inside. The stone thudded back into place, sealing the truth in darkness where fire could not reach. He whispered almost reverently, "They won't bury this again." The satellite phone on the table buzzed. A message from Evan Brooks. "FBI received the files. Agents inbound. ETA unknown. Hold tight." Caleb exhaled, but the relief was thin, fragile, and short-lived. The storm changed. Hunter lifted his head at the exact same moment Caleb noticed the shift. The wind stopped screaming and instead pulsed an unnatural rhythm like footfalls muffled beneath white noise. Caleb's stomach tightened. Hunter's low growl confirmed it. They were not alone. A flicker of orange seeped through a gap in the shuttered window. Then another. Then another. Caleb's pulse snapped into sharp focus. Fire! They were burning the outer walls. The smell of kerosene seeped through the cracks, harsh, oily, unmistakable. The attackers had returned, and this time they weren't here to scare him away. They were here to erase everything. The first explosion of heat hit the cabin like a hammer. Wood snapped. Flames hissed and climbed the outer logs, crackling with terrible hunger. Shadows moved outside, 3, maybe 4 figures' silhouettes against the rising fire, each armed, each prepared. Caleb grabbed his rifle. Hunter pressed forward, muscles tensed, ready to charge through hell itself if Caleb asked. Caleb whispered, "Not yet. Stay with me." Fire chewed up the windowsills. Smoke thickened into choking curtains that crawled along the ceiling. The cabin, built with old timber dried by decades of mountain summers, ignited far too easily. Flames licked across the rafters like claws. Hunter barked sharply, one warning, then another. A figure appeared outside the front door, tall and broad. A different one moved along the left wall, holding something long and metal, probably a pry bar. Another silhouette behind him carried a rifle. They were coordinating. Caleb's mind sharpened into the cold steel of his past training. But for all the grit and discipline he had left, he knew one thing with bone-deep certainty. The cabin would not survive the next 10 minutes. The rear wall shuddered as flames raced upward. The ceiling sagged. Smoke bit into his lungs like knives. Caleb wrapped his arm around Hunter's neck, pulling the dog close. "We move on my count," he whispered. Hunter, completely trusting, pressed against him. The flames surged again, brighter, hotter, spitting embers. One of the attackers shouted through the storm. And this Caleb didn't wait. He kicked the front door with everything he had. The half-burned wood cracked open as a sheet of heat blasted outward. He stormed through the fiery threshold with Hunter at his side, emerging into the open clearing like a man thrown from the heart of the fire. 3 figures instantly turned toward him. The first man, tall, bald, wearing a dark parka and ski mask, raised his rifle. His posture was stiff, military trained. The second was shorter, stockier, with a scar running down his cheek, gripping a handgun with both hands. The third hovered behind them with a fuel canister still dripping kerosene into the snow. Snowflakes hissed as they melted against the burning cabin behind him. Hunter took 1 step forward, teeth bared, ready to strike. Caleb raised his rifle. But he was outnumbered, outflanked, and the fire was closing in behind him like a collapsing sun. For a brief, searing moment, Caleb believed this was the end. A lifetime of battles, regret, and wandering had led him to a clearing of fire and snow with his only loyal companion at his side. He whispered almost inaudibly, "I'm sorry, boy." Then the sky thundered. A deep, mechanical roar split the storm. Wind ripped downward in a violent spiral. Snow blasted outward in a vortex. Pine branches bent and whipped like they were bowing to a force larger than nature itself. A helicopter descended through the storm, dark, angular, unmistakably federal. A second one marked with the emblem of the FBI flanked it. Spotlights ignited the clearing like day. A voice boomed from above, amplified with unmistakable authority. "FBI, drop your weapons, hands in the air." The 3 attackers froze. The bald man dropped his rifle first. The scarred man hesitated only a moment longer before his gun clattered onto the ice. The third dropped the fuel can and fell to his knees. Red dots from sniper scopes danced across their chests. And then Caleb saw another figure among the agents rappelling down the ropes. Sheriff Alan Royce, his face usually carefully arranged into political calm, was contorted in panic. 2 agents seized him immediately, wrenching his hands behind his back. Royce sputtered, "This is a mistake. You don't understand. An agent cut him off coldly. "Save it for the federal court." Caleb watched, chest rising and falling with harsh breaths, as the sheriff was dragged through the snow, his badge reflecting the burning cabin behind him like a twisted confession. Cascadian Mining Group's secret was falling apart in real time. The cabin collapsed inward with a thunderous groan. Flames leapt upward, logs split, the roof caved in. Caleb felt the heat on his face, but he didn't look away. The evidence, the real evidence, was safe beneath the stone. Hunter pressed against his side tail, low eyes fixed on the last burning pieces of the place they once hoped would become a refuge. Caleb touched the dog's head gently. "It's okay," he whispered. "We saved what mattered." Months later, spring sunlight melted the last of the winter's grip on Sierra Nevada. Evan Brooks's expose exploded across California. Cascadian Mining Group fell. Sheriff Royce and 6 officials faced trial. Families were compensated. Rivers were restored. And on that same clearing where a cabin had turned to ash, Caleb stood building its replacement. New logs, new foundation, same mountain air. Hunter lay on the half-built porch, eyes bright with the quiet certainty of a creature who knew they had finally earned peace. Caleb looked at the horizon and felt perhaps for the first time in years that he was home. In the ashes of that forgotten cabin, Caleb and Hunter found more than truth. They found a reminder that even in the darkest storms, God plants quiet miracles for those who refuse to give up. Just as light broke through the Sierra clouds for them, may His grace guide you through every hardship in your own life. If this story touched your heart, please share it so others may feel this hope too. Leave a comment, let us hear your thoughts, and subscribe to join our growing family. May God bless you and protect everyone watching today.